declaration of members' interest. Members are required to register all relevant and financial or other interests in their member of register's interests. The main objectives of today's meeting is as follows. Agenda item 7 will be the inquiry on developing skills for Northern Ireland's future, briefing from RAISE on the skills landscape in the south of Ireland. The agenda item 8 is the inquiry into child poverty in Northern Ireland, memorandum of reply which has been received, which members hopefully have considered and looked at. Agenda item 9 is the briefing on primacy and the role of statutory committees. And agenda item 10 is major capital projects follow-up report prep session to allocate topics for next week's evidence session. So members, I know you are conscious of time, so if in between me talking and other things, if you should look at some of those questions and if there's anything that jumps out, because we'll be doing that allocation. Can I also inform members that at agenda item 9, members receive a briefing on primacy and the role of the statutory committees from the Clerk Assistant Frank Geddes. This item is scheduled to take place in closed session. Members content for that to happen? Yes? Okay. Can also inform members that at agenda item 10 we'll prepare for the evidence session on major capital projects and follow-up report next week with the head of the Civil Service and the DOF, Department of Finance. This item is also scheduled to take place in closed session. Members are content? Okay. I call the meeting to order, and can we, just before I do call the meeting to order, broadcasting, as you know, Lucia. Yeah.
No, we're in open session now.
We're in open session, okay. So we have Peter McCallion with us this week in place of Lucia, who is currently off, and we're relying also on the kind assistance of Kirsten as our assistant clerk, and with Peter's agreement as clerk, we'll refer some of the points to Kirsten. Sure. Throughout the committee business today. So thank you, members. Okay, members, the meeting is open to the public, and as I've said, this is the 29th meeting of the Public Accounts Committee in this mandate. Can I advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and as members know, there could be a slight delay between any private and public sessions, so please be patient. Can I also advise anybody that is joining us in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. Also connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi. The password is in the gallery rules, and it is not permitted to take any photographs or record the proceedings. I would just again like to welcome Peter and of course Laura, who's stepping in for Marie this week, and we're also sending our best wishes to Karen. So thanks very much. Can we proceed as follows? Agenda item 1 is apologies. I've received apologies from David Honeyford, MLA. Any others?
And okay. Diane will just be a few minutes late.
Diane will be late, okay. Padraig Delargy, MLA, is trying to join us remotely, and when he is, we'll confirm. Okay, members, can I refer you to the pack for a copy of the draft minutes of the meeting of the 16th of January at page 7 of the pack. Members seek agreement of those meetings. Minutes, please.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll sign. Okay, members, agenda item 3 is declaration of interest. Can I ask if members have any relevant declaration of interest to declare for this particular meeting? Okay, Padraig is now on screen. Padraig, can you hear us okay?
Yep, Chair, thank you.
Thank you, you're very welcome. Okay, members, agenda item 4, matters arising. At pages 15 of your pack is a letter from Neil Gibson, the Accounting Officer for the Department of Finance, confirming that both he and the Head of the Civil Service, Jane Brady, will be available to attend the rescheduled evidence session of major capital projects follow-up report on January 30th. Are members content to note this correspondence?
Great.
Okay. And also welcome Diane Forsyth, MLA, to the meeting. Diane, you're very welcome. Members, at page 16 of the pack is a letter dated January 20th, 2025 from Ian Snowden, the Accounting Officer for the Department for the Economy. It provides a response to questions raised by this committee following the evidence session on the 21st of November 2024 on developing skills for Northern Ireland's future. Can I seek members' views on that, if they've had a chance to consider? 16. Diane, proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on it, there was a couple of documents referenced in that response. It would be good to have sight of. The Gateway Review Report, I think it was, and just a couple of things where it mentioned that it has been reviewed, the duplication of costs. If we could be able to have access to those documents, that would be helpful.
It's the Gateway Review and
Yeah, there's two documents. Sorry, my
Gateway
computer's-
review, identification, duplication first.
Yeah, so it's talking about the Gateway Review and how it did look into that in a lot of detail, and yeah, just if there was some report on that particular Gateway Review that was completed, because they said that they have gone into the details of the duplication, but if there was anything coming out of it, I think it would be really helpful.
Oh, okay, members? Agreed? Okay, any other issues members like to raise? No? Okay. Members, you content that the letter be shared with the Northern Ireland Audit Office for inclusion in the final report? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, at page 20 of the pack is a letter from the Department of Health confirming that Peter May, the accounting officer for the Department of Health, and Gerard Cassidy, Director of Primary Care, and Dr. Margaret O'Brien, Head of General Medical Services, Strategic Planning and Performance Group, will be attending the Public Accounts Committee to provide evidence to the inquiry into access to GP services on March 6th. Members, are you content to note this correspondence?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, members, at pages 24 to 25 of the pack are letters from the Royal College of General Practitioners and the British Medical Association confirming that they will attend the session to provide evidence to the inquiry into access to GP services on February 27th. Are members content to note this correspondence?
Yep.
Okay, and at pages 5 and 6 of the table pack is the article referred to by David Honeyford MLA at last week's meeting in respect of procurement arrangements for nursing homes in Northern Ireland. A draft letter to the Department of Health is also provided for your consideration at pages 3 of the table pack. Members, any comments or content to note? Okay. Okay, members, are you content that we now issue the letter to the Department of Health?
Right, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5, Chairperson of Business. Just one thing, I want to thank Cheryl Brownlee, the Deputy Chair of the Committee, for meeting with the Youth Assembly, and Kirsten, of course, and I'm told that it was a very worthwhile meeting and good engagement from the Youth Assembly. Is there anything you want to say on it?
Yeah, just to say, it was really good actually. I think we could have chatted a lot longer, and we got so much from the young people just about how their views and things that we've never discussed or even thought about. So I think it was really, really worthwhile, and I'll be excited to see what they bring to the inquiry. And I think it's the perfect topic for them, and it means so much, and they're going through it right now. So it was really good.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you, Kirsten, as well.
No problem.
Okay, members, agenda item 6, correspondence. At page 28 of the pack is a letter from the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People, Chris Quinn, requesting a meeting with the Chair and the Deputy Chair of this committee to discuss NICE priorities and the PAC programme of work. I've had a bit of a conversation with Kirsten in relation to this earlier, and we will respond to the Commissioner. But as members, any particular views? I think, it's probably not best use of the committee's time that we have such a briefing session, because there'll be quite a lot of people that will look to come to this committee to give such briefings about the important work that they do. Most of us, if not all of us, are on other committees, and we're very conscious of the good work that is done by the Children's Commissioner and their office. And I think we should acknowledge that in a letter of response back to Chris Quinn. Has members any... I don't think it's appropriate that he comes and gives a presentation formally, because our time is tight and we have quite a number of inquiries. But has members any views on meeting with them? Is there any objection that the Chair and Deputy Chair maybe meet with Chris Quinn, even informally, for a cup of coffee or something like that, if that's...
Sure. Just, we've had him in for evidence and presenting to the committee on the child poverty, and I think that it's good that whenever there is a formal inquiry that he's invited in for that, but certainly to seek the views I'd be content with the chair and the deputy chair doing that.
Right, yeah.
Members content with that? And I think it's important in the response, clerk and assistant clerk, that we acknowledge the good work of the Office of the Children's Commissioner. It is vital, and given how we are now engaging with organisations and people at the coalface that are impacted directly by the various areas that we are investigating in our inquiries, I think it is important to maintain a strong relationship and acknowledge their work, but also, even on an informal basis, have these conversations where necessary. But we are very conscious of the work. But if they would share share their programme of work with us, that would be very helpful as well. Members content?
Content.
Okay, members, at pages 30 to 84 of the pack is a letter from the Northern Ireland Audit Office enclosing the annual report and accounts for 22-23 for Assembly and Members' Contributory Pension Fund. Members, are you content to note the correspondence, or is there any particular issues that you would like to raise?
Content, Chair.
All content? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, at page 10 of the table pack is a letter received from Margaret Ritchie on behalf of her constituent Dermot Nesbitt. Members may recall that this letter was received in December and relates to the planning matters in Crossgar. A draft response to this letter has been provided at page 8 of the table pack for the consideration of committee members, following consultation with the Northern Ireland Audit Office, who provided its correspondence on the matter at page 9 of the table pack. Members, are you content to issue the draft response as outlined? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, agenda item 7 is the inquiry into developing the skills for Northern Ireland's future, oral briefing from RAISE, and I would like to, Barbara, if you'd kindly invite Michael Scholes in from RAISE, please. Members recall that a piece of research was commissioned during the inquiry into developing skills for Northern Ireland's future on the skills landscape in the south of Ireland. A copy of the paper is at pages 88 to 113 of the pack. Michael, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for being with us. Red weather warnings and all afoot. You're very welcome to be with us. And we thank you for taking the time to brief us on your paper. So I invite you to brief the committee. If you keep it as concise as possible, it would be very much appreciated, and members can direct any appropriate questions to you then as they indicate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go through each section of the paper briefly, and that will hopefully leave plenty of time for questions. So really the section 1 of the paper presents a brief overview of the roles and responsibilities of government departments and agencies with a skills remit. Now you can see that's laid out on page 5 of tables 1 and 2. The Department for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science has an overall responsibility for the formulation of skills policy in the Republic, but a variety of government agencies also contribute to the delivery of skills policy, including the Further Education and Training Authority, known as SOLAS, the Education and Training Boards, Regional Skills Fora, the National Skills Council, the National Qualifications Awarding Body, Quality and Qualifications Ireland. Section 2 then on page 8 outlines key skills strategies. Firstly, the skills strategy, National Skills Strategy 2025, Ireland's Future, was published in 2016, and that created 2 new skills bodies. Firstly, a National Skills Council to advise government on skills needs, and 9 regional skills fora to act as single contact points in each region, connecting employers with skills services. In 2020, SOLAS launched the Further Education and Training Strategy. It lists building skills, fostering inclusion, creating pathways as 3 of its three strategic priorities. And most recently in 2023, the OECD conducted a major review of the skills landscape in Ireland. And that review described Ireland as a leader in developing advanced skills governance arrangements, largely due to the establishment of the Skills Council and the regional fora. However, it was critical of the makeup of the Skills Council regarding the lack of diversity amongst its membership. So moving on then to section 3 on page 16 of the paper, it really presents key issues for consideration on the Irish skills landscape for the committee. Now, these include employer engagement, skills funding, regional balance, future skills needs. Now, I'll just go through those points briefly and talk about each one. So, with regard to employer engagement, the Skills to Advance national initiative is one in which the employers develop courses in collaboration with the education and training boards to provide upskilling and reskilling opportunities. Now, the Skills to Advance initiative offers micro qualifications specifically in green skills and digital skills. Also, SkillsNet Ireland provide 70 business networks across the regions that connect employers with external training providers. So moving on to skills funding, a national training fund was established by the National Training Fund Act 2000 as a dedicated fund to support training for individuals in employment in Ireland. Now, that is financed by a levy on employers currently set at 1% of reckonable pay, and that's collected through their social insurance or PSRI system. And recently, as part of Budget 2025, the Irish Government agreed a total funding package, a skills funding package of 1.485 billion over a 6-year period, and that takes us from 2025 to 2030. So on regional balance, as I mentioned before, the 9 regional skills fora were set up to connect people in their regions to meet their skills needs. Now, they bring together employers, education and training providers, enterprise agencies, local authorities and government bodies. And finally, on future skills needs, there's two groups that were set up to look at the future needs, skills needs of the Irish economy. The expert group on future skills needs is an independent body that advises the government on the future needs for the economy. And the members of it include policy stakeholders in the public sector and representation from business and the trade unions. And lastly, the Skills and Labour Market Research Unit inside SOLAS collect, gather and analyse a range of data sets on skills demand and supply. So the paper then concludes at section 4 on page 23 with some key takeaways for the committee. So that's a very brief rundown of the paper, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that. We've Colin Gildeneuve, and if members would like to speak, just indicate.
Yeah, thanks for that. It is a useful insight. The reason I think it was me that suggested we do this was I had heard even from colleges here that the skills landscape there is much better organised around that issue. Notwithstanding the remarks about the criticisms around diversity and that issue, if it is worth leading, and it seems, I think the beauty of it to me seems a fairly straightforward setup. And while we have been working our way through that inquiry, it's been quite a quagmire. I'm actually a little surprised that when we had the officials here talking about this, that there wasn't. I had asked them about communication. They said they met a couple of times a year, but there's no kind of indication that they were overly aware or across that kind of. So I just think there's a bit more could be done in terms of learning from their mistakes, improving it and making it better, but tailoring that in some way to our needs rather than reinventing the wheel, if that's seen as leading. I think we could pick up lots of lots of the suggestions in there, and better cooperation should be hardwired into how we're doing skills going forward.
Okay, yeah. Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for this. I'm getting lots of raised papers through to my committees lately, and it's great to hear them all. Great quality work, and I think what Colin was saying was absolutely right. Although it looks like they actually have more departments and bodies and things all involved in the Republic of Ireland whenever they're dealing with their skills, and they seem to work more fluidly together than our 2 bodies that we actually have. So I think that is a fair comment, and it's definitely something that we could be recommending, especially in terms of best practice.
Yeah, I mean, if I could elaborate on that, perhaps. I think you're right. Both contributions are spot on there. I think the overall strategic approach to skills seems to be be pretty solid, right from the funding to the strategies itself. Going back to 2016, the creation of those 2 bodies, and everything does seem to work quite well together. Despite, I think, the criticism of the Skills Council that you picked up there was that the OECD found that basically it was sort of government heavy. There wasn't that much input from the employer side, so it became a sort of a talking shop. They had a lot of government officials and a lot of civil servants that got round and had a bit of a chat about, wouldn't it be great to do this, that and the other. So I think that's one thing to be mindful. I know we have our own skills council here, and it does have representation from industry and education, but I think there's definitely lessons to be learned from that OECD report about the overall architecture of skills in the Republic. But they do seem to have, if you like, all the angles covered. And they do. I think one of the important things as well is the data collection that they do as well on the skills needs and the future skills needs that they have, as well as the different types of qualifications. One of the interesting things in the paper is this development of micro skills that's set up so that firms, individuals, employees can get a micro skill that's set up by their employer with the education trainer provider. So it's work based, but it also gives them, if you like, a qualification, a feather in their cap for their CV as well. So I think that would be something that would be worth looking at here as well.
I think looking at this and looking at what we have, I think one of the things is where we fall down here is lack of employer engagement. There is employer engagement to a certain extent. It's not what it should be. And I think that is a problem. And I've always noticed that a problem over the years, even when I was in the building construction myself and taking on young people. It was the lack of engagement with the employers where the whole system seemed to fall apart. And I think that is something that we can learn from, even from this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and especially the construction industry. If you think about it, engagement, it's the level and the detail of the engagement that the employers know what they need. They know what it's actually involved in, if you like, in a degree in construction or building degree. Whereas it'd be very easy to just think like 5 years ago we needed bricklayers, we needed whatever it is. But the employers right now know what skills, the actual skills that are required for the future in the construction industry. So it's vital that we get their opinion, so then that feeds back through into the training provider, so they can change their curricula and actually provide qualifications with that input in it, so that we have the skills for the future. Because that's what it's all about. It's not about getting a qualification. It's about improving the economy through better skills. And then productivity is going to come. All of those economic benefits are going to flow from that.
It's getting a skill that meets the need, because if you take the welding industry, there's young people and they're going there getting a skill for the welding, but it's not the skill that is required for certain welding jobs that's required. And then those folk have to be retrained again by the employer when they take them on, which is really a double whammy, if you like.
It's wasting time, isn't it, for both?
Cheryl and then Colin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the report. I just wanted to touch on STEM, because I know within the NI Audit Office report that was something that we lacked any progress on. Just in terms of the Republic, are you seeing what they're doing to improve women within STEM, and how are they doing it? And it seems that there has been significant progress in basically improving representation, and indeed with courses, but also in the workplace, which I think is important to have both. So it's just if you knew anything about that.
Well, the first thing I would say, this paper is an overview, a high-level overview, so I didn't go into any specifics on gender issues, for example, or indeed STEM per se. It was more about the overall landscape and the architecture of the skills. One thing I would say about looking at the future skills, that's going to be an important part to make sure that every member of our society contributes to the future skills needs. So the digital skills, micro qualifications would be an example of that, and the green skills. I mean, the OECD Northern Ireland report as well highlighted the importance of green and digital skills going forward. But to answer your questions, no, the research didn't look specifically at that, but that's something that I can take away and look at if the committee requires it, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just also strikes me that across a range of our inquiries and a range of departments, we come across a set of themes around delivery, working in silos, past learning not being implemented. One thing that has emerged here today again, and we discussed it earlier in our earlier committee in relation to housing, is the issue of data. And you just get a sense right across the piece that we're poor on data. Data is actually quite easily, it is flowing all the time. It's a question of putting in the nets to catch it. That's getting easier and easier done. It's getting more and more important with AI. But I just sort of develop an overall sense that we actually need a data review across government and maybe even a data council or something like that. I think, and Diana raises it often, data is a no-brainer almost. And in some ways we're fumbling about in the dark needlessly in relation to a lot of very important issues.
And without it, we struggle to improve or measure where we're going wrong, or how we improve and where we're at. And there may be duplicate. Well, we know there's duplication in various places. There's no data collation in some, so it is a major. It's actually a major blockage for us in terms of our role in terms of accountability as well.
If I could just pick up on that as well, is that it's part of the section 3 there on future skills needs. They SOLAS, the Education and Training Authority, actually have a specific body or a group inside their organisation that looks specifically at data sets for that specific reason, that looks at the future need and the demand and supply of so that's an example of where they've critically looked at the data gaps, and that's something certainly that I think that we could look at.
We're too often extrapolating from other places and other parts of the world, and like I was told on one occasion by the Home Office that there was no need for welders. No need for welders within there, and if you took that anywhere into Mid-Ulster, I'll tell you what, you'd be laughed out of the place. But we're too often relying on inexact data. We need to develop our own to respond.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah, and Chair, just to build on Colum's point, like very much in Northern Ireland we're very outward facing with the data. It's we're relying on NISRA and they're reporting it out for a particular reason, for the reasons and the scales for which they're required to report certain things. It's the data within departments. Just exactly what you're saying. They're reporting it to report out the ways, but there doesn't seem to be a recognition that you need to collect it and report it inwards to try to do things better and share it with other departments. So definitely think there's a recommendation in there somewhere.
And I think that's where SOLAS as a body, SOLAS themselves then have the power to actually say, no, we need to look at this. And you're absolutely right. The data sets that we have available are really just a range of data sets for official publications, for official statistics, for ONS and NISRA. So that's a very static data set that we have across the board. So if we had an organisation like SOLAS or whatever, they could say, actually, this is what we require, go on to it.
Okay. Michael, thanks very much for being with us. That's very helpful, and we appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Used to do further work on.
We're playing now, you come at that point.
Yeah.
A bit more about it.
That's right.
Members, is there any particular area that you'd like to expand or seek further work on from Ray's in relation to that? You've indicated a number of points, and so did you, particularly in STEM, Sharon. So.
Just even on that, and I knew this was kind of high level, but I know we have been touching on that special educational needs and the support within the workplace there, so it would be good to kind of get a comparable and see what is happening elsewhere too.
Yeah, if Ray's could maybe develop that piece of work and say, and where does the gaps exist between what's working well there and what we have, and where we might need to move to improve our.
So a wider piece now, just in comparison. Okay.
Just to be clear, it's a gap analysis around skill stuff.
Between north and south.
Yep.
Yeah, to see what they're doing that has caught the eye of OECD, and what we are doing, maybe part of that, and what we could do further to become.
And at work.
Yeah, SEN and then STEM as well.
Yeah, and also the department working. I know there's a number of groups which he's highlighted there, but we need to do a deeper dive into, like I said, right across the departments, opposed to straight across in terms of skill set. So, because they may have it farmed out or contracted out in some way, especially if we're working with the private sector.
Yep.
So it's just that engagement department.
How will you expand that for?
Sorry, no, the way the report's high level and it's informed us here about a number of groups, But we want to find out exactly how the departments are actually engaging, rather than just contract out, responsibilities, the number of skills groups there's a number, right? So expand it out how that engagement is with the departments right across the board, because we have a major skill set right across the board, a gap right across the board. So, like for instance, how department here economy is working across education. Maybe there's learning from that if he does a wee bit digging into more into departments and what they're actually doing, because it was just more of a broader overview that he's given us today, so there may be more detail there. So
Further inform the Republic of Ireland and how that might be applicable in Northern Ireland. Yep, cool. Excellent. Thanks, Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, members, agenda item 8 is the inquiry into child poverty in Northern Ireland memorandum of reply. At this juncture, can I welcome to the meeting our Controller and Auditor General for Northern Ireland, Mr. Ina Carville, Mr. Thomas Wilkinson, Director of the Northern Ireland Audit Office, and Mr. Kyle Bingham, the Assembly Support Officer from the Northern Ireland Audit Office. Members, I refer you to the MOR on child poverty in Northern Ireland. It's at page 115 to 123 of your pack. And with Peter's permission, I'll ask Kirsten to brief the committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, of the 11 recommendations that were made, 10 of them have been accepted and 1 of them has been partially accepted, and we've target implementation dates ranging from March to December 2025. In respect of several of the recommendations, there is a caveat that these are matters for the Executive to decide, or they're subject to cross-departmental working, so there are still potential issues there around overall oversight and governance and that cross-departmental working. So just to give a wee update on each of the recommendations, the first recommendation was around bringing forward the anti-poverty strategy. Target implementation is March 25. There's a further written update going to be provided by the department by the end of this month. They have advised that the draft strategy will focus on addressing the root causes of socioeconomic disadvantage and helping people to exit poverty. Clear targets and outcomes, they've only partially accepted. That's one of the ones where they've very much relied upon the fact that there's a cross-departmental element there. And again, the final decisions in respect of strategy and targets will sit with the Executive in the drafting of the strategy. Recommendation 3 was around investment in long-term preventative measures. So decisions again there will be dependent on the input from other departments, and effective delivery will be subject to ongoing cooperation between the departments through the cross-departmental working group. The minimising risks pillar of the draft strategy, as announced by Minister Lyons, will include actions aimed at minimising the risk of people and their families falling into poverty. So hopefully we'll address that recommendation. Recommendation 4 was an action plan that's properly costed and outlines what's deliverable within the existing budgets, as well as what they could do with further funding. So that is going to be included in a paper on the anti-poverty strategy that's due to be presented to the Executive shortly. They do highlight that value for money will consider to be a matter for the individual departments, which may raise questions again about the oversight role of the department in the value for money across the whole strategy. With recommendation 5, that was around accountability mechanisms and continuous review. So the measures are included in the strategy and will include timescales and procedures for review, but obviously that will be subject to actually members getting sight of the strategy. Recommendation 6 was around clear governance and accountability arrangements. This is where it slightly contradicts the issue around value for money. So as part of the development of the anti-poverty strategy, Department for Communities will make recommendations on governance and accountability, which will include recommending lead departments and roles and outlining how they will work together effectively and with others to deliver the strategy. So that seems to suggest that there will be an overall oversight role. So the question would be why that doesn't extend to the value for money piece. Recommendation 7 was to explore options for independent monitoring to provide more robust scrutiny and monitor outcomes. So the Department for Communities said they'll outline the option to develop independent monitoring mechanisms, and that will be presented to the Executive, but again that's going to be a matter for the Executive to decide upon. Recommendation 8 was ensuring more streamlined and outcomes focused monitoring mechanisms in the anti-poverty strategy. So the Department have recognised that it's good practice for the strategy to include mechanisms to measure progress and provide assurances that monitoring mechanisms for the strategy will be effective, transparent and outcomes focused. But again, they've said that the final decisions on that will rest with the Executive. The 9th recommendation was around the Children's Services Cooperation Act. So the department has agreed that there is potential in the Act to allow organisations to pool resources and share outcomes. They're engaging with the departments to try and understand the potential barriers and produce a plan to reduce or remove barriers, and that should be hopefully done by December 2025. Recommendation 10 was around the community and voluntary sector, and the department have stressed that they recognise the valuable contribution the voluntary and community sector has made to the development of the strategy to date, and recognises the key role that they have. They hope to build on the existing engagement and develop engagement through the life of the strategy, and that should be supported by and will complement the Department for Community's role as the lead department for the executive's relationship with the voluntary and community sector through the new partnership agreement between the government and community and voluntary sector. And then recommendation 11 was that they retain a list of the community and voluntary sector organisations that deliver services for children. So that work's going to be sitting alongside the work to address recommendation 10. They're going to develop a key stakeholders database and update that regularly to ensure that they have identified the organisations and have a working knowledge of the services and support that they're providing.
Thank you, Kirsten. Okay, so out of the 11, we almost had a full deck. We had a partial one in relation to number 2, clear targets and outcomes. And there's a bit of passing the buck exercise going on there, and we need to probably nail that down a wee bit better, because a lot of the criticisms and a lot of the issues that are rising is in relation to clear targets and outcomes generally, and we're finding that more and more. And if there's a hiding place, then some will find themselves in it. So I'll go to Colin Gildernew first, and then Diane.
Yeah, it's on that one as well, Chair, and I agree with your comments. And to add to them, I suppose, so what does partially, which bit of it do they partially accept, or to which degree do they partially accept it? They seem to be saying, because this would be difficult, we're not, in a sense, in terms of other, but if the department themselves only partially accept the recommendation, how do they expect to hold all of those other departments to account in relation to delivering those? So I find it a wee bit of a dismissal of a very important recommendation, and I would like to know much more detail about, rather than just partially accepting. I don't get that sense of detail about why it's not achievable, because it is important.
Because it brings into question all of the others.
Yeah.
You know, if there's not a clear target or
will
outcome.
Will other departments have to account for it at all if the lead department isn't accepting it fully?
Yeah.
The rest of the departments just say, well, it hasn't been accepted by the department. We can't. Actually, we can't. Not only will we not, but we can't accept something that the DFC hasn't.
Yep. We'll go to Diane and then Dorina, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think that it's good that with all these target implementation dates, you're looking at March 2025 across the board. So that was what was alluded to this financial year, and it is quite close. So there'll be quite quick follow up and things for this. So that shows that to a degree it is well progressed. I'm a little bit confused as to why they've only partially accepted the recommendation too, because to me, it's quite a simple recommendation that you need targets and outcomes. And they are saying they're taking on targets and outcomes, so I don't know why they wouldn't just accept the recommendation. To me, that's just not totally clear. Other than, as Kirsten had said, just trying to say that everybody has an issue here, but at the same time, if DFC are the lead department on it, I don't know why they wouldn't have just accepted that recommendation that we need targets and we're going to monitor them centrally on behalf of everyone if they're going to be the lead department. But
and it's important from an accountability point of view to ensure that they're implementing these, because it prevents them then coming to this committee and saying, well, we don't actually know, it's the responsibility of another department. Whereas if there's someone in the lead department that's chasing this up and then coming to us and say, well, we've tried this, but the Department of Health aren't working with us or whatever, then we know then where there's a problem. Whereas this is just leaving it open-ended, and it really comes back to the problems with the initial strategy because of this sort of thing. Dorina?
Yeah, I think certainly in overall terms, I think you've got a good response here. You do have a lot accepted, and as Diane points out there, the target dates are all quite close, so you don't, because I think with a lot of this, it is the proof will be in the pudding, so to speak, of seeing it actually implemented. Listening to the conversation then on recommendation 2, you may want to seek further clarity as to what that partial acceptance means. I was reading it a little bit differently, but again, perhaps erroneously, because the second paragraph, does say about the strategy content will include the potential for targets, and I recalled from the evidence that we got there was conflicting evidence at the department. They talked about that there were problems sometimes with setting targets as well. So I was reading it as they were maybe still deliberating themselves, but again potentially erroneously in my reading of it. There is no mention of outcomes, which will in this response, which your recommendation is there's a clear need for targets and outcomes. Later on in responses there is reference to outcomes as well. So we're 2 months away from March, whether you want to wait and see what goes forward or whether you want to get clarity now, but it certainly sounds from listening to the conversation that you're not clear on what the partial recommendation acceptance is around.
Just given what we've learned in this particular inquiry, it's better to ask now. We don't want to repeat the mistakes that have caused major issues previously. So I think we seek clarification around number 2 and why it was only partially accepted, and then I suppose, is it appropriate to state the committee's concerns in relation to it? I suppose so, yeah. Dan and then Colin.
Yeah, and given that the targets are March, they're not saying 1st of March or 31st of March, where we can obviously make assumptions as to what end it will be. But I think that if we're going back to seek clarity on it, I think it would be good to say, we recognise that this is March and we look forward to seeing the updates on it, and wouldn't do any harm to suggest that we would like to invite them back for an update on it in late April, to say how it performed on the March, just to show that we're going to want to see how that March report had gone.
Yeah.
I suppose I was just going to say that the way I read it was that the department was saying they're going to develop an action plan as part of the overall strategy, which will then be presented to the executive. But that following on from that, any specific targets or anything that was going to be set after that would be dependent on all the departments together through the executive.
But how is that workable? How do they measure whether that's been done or not if they're just simply saying
They would propose an action plan to the executive, which then has to be funded and...
I'm reading that there.
There's too many hiding places in that. To be honest. Colin?
Yeah, and the problem is you don't even get beyond the first part of the sentence. So if they say they partially accept, and the first sentence is there's clear need of our recommendation, the clear need for targets and outcomes, is it partially accepted in the sense that they accept targets but not outcomes, or vice versa? And if you come on down then to their further discussion, they talk about the potential for targets. So they're sort of saying there might not be any. So I think part of this work needs to be identifying what the targets are, because this is a recurring problem. And if you don't have the target, then how do you judge the outcome? So you almost finish up with nothing if you don't be careful. And I agree, the overall response has been good, but I think it's a pity that it may be difficult, but it's necessary, and therefore it needs to be done. So surely it's not beyond the wit of us all to come up with those targets and therefore have the outcomes.
Yeah, it just seems as though they're happy to produce all this great work to the executive, and then once it's on the executive's table, it's just done now. It's for you to deal with. And no follow-up. So like many strategies across Northern Ireland, they sit on the shelf and aren't actually implemented, and this one cannot sit even for a day more than it already has. So Cathal?
Yeah, thanks Jared, thanks very much for the overview from Kirsten and obviously responses. I can see it there. I mean, the problem, Chair, for us is the development is getting the information back. It's the departments coming back and they're referring to the executive, which is fair enough. But in relation to what Colin said, it's with somebody taking the lead. So when you develop the strategy, they need to sign up to the strategy. So, whilst it's all right saying we'll play our part and do our part, it's not even a statute. It's about accountability and responsibility, really. And I mean, I don't know. I can see that. I don't know, looking back now, whether or not we would have rewarded the recommendation. Do you know what I mean, in terms of stronger responsibility? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I can see now where it would be very easy for the single department to come back and say that's why they referred to the executive. So, but still, I suppose my question, Chair, is in asking the question about when you accept lead responsibility, that's where it lies. Do you know what I mean? And fair enough, if the executive accepted that, they could put pressure on the rest of the departments to bring their own responsibilities and targets and on data and information, but I think it still lies with the department that took responsibility in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's where it is, you know, and I can see that. But we're learning. We're getting into the hub of it, Chair. But it's just as some of the conversation develops. So let's approach that. That's the way we're going to go down the road and see. Because once you take responsibility, it's your responsibility. So just a few comments, Chair.
The other thing I would just draw to your attention is the response to recommendation 9, which is the one that has been for the Department of Finance. I think this is a really interesting piece of work. It's born out of the Children's Cooperation Act, which is, you know, what the point was in the context of this inquiry. But if you read the outcome, the piece of work that DOF is committing to do by December 25, I think will be of real interest to this committee in the wider sense, because they're looking at what are the existing levels of bureaucracy and administrative burdens and how can they break them down. And that's something that you've repeatedly seen across many inquiries around, you know, as one of the barriers to collaborative working and to cross working. So I think that's it's, you know, it's due to be implemented by December 25, but it potentially has benefits that are wider reaching than just this inquiry.
Yeah, it is a good recommendation. To be fair, the general response is reassuring.
Yeah.
With the exception of recommendation 2, and I think we probably could put that in it.
Chair, that answers the question. DOF is taking responsibility there and give time for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
for their part.
that, yes.
So the rest, do you know what I mean? That's the whole notion of it. That department has stood up, you know, and that's where it lies. You know what I mean? That's my, you know, that's where it lies. So.
Are you happy?
No,
Okay.
fine.
Well, so, members, I think then with the comments as raised, I think it's fair to say that thank them for the update, but and some of the interesting recommendations that have been accepted and the work that's ongoing there. But I think, given what has been said, it might be best that we invite them back in April, if members are in agreement, to update us. I think that's the most appropriate time, particularly given our strong focus in various inquiries in targets and outcomes. We've been very clear throughout that inquiry and others that that's what we want to see, and that's where a lot of the shortcomings have been. So if members are agreed, we'll invite them back in April.
And Chair, are you holding the MOR
you know what I mean?
then?
You know the story.
You just hold it for now.
Well, the supremacy ends whenever you discharge the MOR, but I think you still have work to do here. It's only a month. You can hold and say, look, no, we've considered the MOR, but we haven't finished yet. So when you come back in April, well, then maybe, if you make us happy, we will discharge the MOR.
Okay.
I'm actually scared.
So thank you, Clerk. I think, given that we're going to invite them back in April, I think it's best that we hold them until that time, and then we'll make a decision around discharging it thereafter. That'd be fair.
Is that agreed, Chairperson?
Is that agreed?
Yeah. Good, Chair, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yes, okay. Can I thank CNAG and the Northern Audit Office staff for their assistance with this inquiry. I think it's been an interesting one. And, clearly they're listening there somewhere, so they're responding, and we'll make final judgments on that come April. But thanks very much for your time. Members, we'll move now into closed session if members are agreed.
Good, Chair.
Senate Chamber. Sound